Way back in 2017, I did a video on VR games, because Snowwoman and I had just gotten an HTC Vive. And looking back, man, I had a lot of fun with that thing. If you still to this day have not played any VR games, it is certainly an experience worth having. I discovered some hidden gems like Knockout League, Budget Cuts, Accounting, and even some itch.io titles that explored some of the possibilities with the hardware. My favorite at the time was The Lab, an assortment of minigames made by Valve to show off the technology, with the highlight being Longbow, a very addicting tower defense game. All that being said, even at the time I couldn't shake this feeling that none of these really scratched the surface in terms of a really compelling VR title that went beyond basic gimmicks. Most felt like tech demos or were still in early access. But hey, the Vive had barely even been out for a year at that point. Surely things have come a long way since then, right? Well, yes and no. Mostly no. While I was excited for what the future would hold, I ended my last video by saying this. Unfortunately, the technology is still in its infancy, so we haven't really seen that one killer app that blows all the rest out of the water, but I think we will in the next couple years. And wouldn't you know it, just over 12 months later, we would receive exactly that. To say Beat Saber is just Guitar Hero with lightsabers is kind of like saying Mario is a game about eating mushrooms. Technically true, but it doesn't exactly give you the full story now, does it? While a rhythm game seems straightforward on paper, the simple act of chopping up blocks with colored swords feels so satisfying thanks to the haptic feedback. Feels like slicing butter with a hot knife. You don't need to worry about moving or turning around, which means it's obviously a crowd pleaser that most anyone could get into, and is definitely the title I would recommend most to get your casual friend into VR. It just means that it's not going to have the depth for those wanting a little more than a party game, but that doesn't mean it loses its luster quickly. I just booted it up recently and had forgotten how addictive it is to work your way up the difficulty settings until you're swinging like a madman. The real saving grace, however, is the modding community, which allows you to play custom tracks. And this may be the best legitimate use of an Imagine Dragons song. Never thought I'd say that. I remember the first time I played Gangnam Style and realized the blocks were making me do the dance against my will, and I have yet to forgive that creator for it. Plus, Beat Saber has given me the single coolest gaming moment of my life, where I ducked down to dodge a wall and flipped both of my controllers in the air and caught them to keep going in front of a crowd of my friends. Everyone was going absolutely nuts. This is so much harder than you'd think with a headset on. But like I said, there was still that nagging thought in the back of my head of, is this really all VR has to offer? Can nothing else really nail it other than a party pleaser? But luckily, there was one more title that truly blew me away, and yet again, it came from Valve themselves. Do you remember when Half-Life 2 came out and everyone was just enamored with the physics, and how you could pick up anything in the world and play in a giant virtual sandbox? Yeah, they essentially did that again here, but for the world of VR. While this is a prequel and not the eternally awaited Half-Life 3 that everyone had been craving, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't the single best VR title I've ever played. Being limited by physical space, they opted for a teleport button to account for movement, which is something most VR titles have. But almost everything else feels unique from a gameplay perspective. The staples of a normal FPS, like reloading your weapon or picking up resources, now require you to actually reach into your backpack or cock your gun. And they created this really satisfying mechanic where you can point at something you want to pick up and tug it toward yourself, and it'll jump into your hands almost like using the Force or something. And this doubles as both a solution to a tedium problem of having to go up to every shelf or countertop, and something that just makes you feel really cool because you always catch it, unlike real life where I would absolutely fumble and drop it. Making you engage with your ammo clips or shotgun bullets in the middle of a firefight leads to some really tense moments that you wouldn't get by playing with a controller or looking at a monitor. Even the little mini-games to unlock upgrades, which weren't my favorite part of the game, helped me to think in 3D space and get used to the new ideas they were throwing at me, which is something Valve has always strived at. It feels like they looked at all these other VR titles and asked, what can we do that would be something a player has never seen before? Or to get them fully attached with what's going on, not just feel like an outside observer. Because they really do introduce some one-of-a-kind concepts, like how you have to actually raise your hands when the guards tell you to freeze, or cover your mouth in a room filled with poison gas, so that your coughs don't alert the nearby zombies. It's the first time I kind of forgot I was wearing a clunky headset and truly felt like I was there in a different world, which is pretty dang impressive. I even remember trying to fling my shampoo into my hand the next morning in the shower, which I'm sure would have looked so dumb if anyone else was in the room. So you'd think with two killer apps like these, VR would be saved, right? No, not even close really. It's been over 6 years since my last video, but if you look at the top VR games on Steam today, most of them are non-VR games that included as a side mode, which tells me it was always seen as a gimmick by most people. I mean, my Vive video quickly became one of my least viewed. I think the interest just wasn't there, even from the start. Pricing has always been an issue, but it seems like instead of coming down over time, the technology has just improved, so it's remained at a high price. And with so many brands focusing on other, frankly, stupid uses of VR instead, I don't exactly have high hopes for the future. If there's one company that could potentially change the tide though, it would have to be Valve. Based on their track record, they know what they're doing when it comes to innovative experiences. But again, I won't exactly hold my breath. Who knows, in another 6 years things could be totally different, and I certainly hope to play another Beat Saber or Half-Life in terms of how they change the game. But at least for now, my VR comes out for the occasional longbow session, and the rest of the time gathers more dust than my Wii U gamepad. And unless something huge arrives and shakes things up, I fear that will be its final resting place as well.